The sounds of the season can often sound like this.
So, when are we getting some grandkids?
But with Hilton's Season to Stay sale, they could sound a bit more like this. Or this. Stay and save up to 20% off when you book before January 5th at Hilton.com. Hilton, for the stay. Minimum 2-night stay required. Excludes luxury and all-inclusive properties. Terms and conditions apply.
But like really thinking about, can we do things at a different time to get ready for bed? And that way then at bedtime, we're just focused, maybe it's teeth brushing or showering at an earlier time or a different time, just shaking things up a little bit to see if that might have an impact on how everybody responds.
I'm Debbie Reber, and welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. And this is a Parent Lean-In episode, a bite-sized show where I answer a single listener question, sometimes on my own, sometimes with a coach from the Differently Wired Club, and sometimes with an author or expert who's become one of my go-to resources. Think one relatable parent question followed by practical strategies or reframes that can support you in your parenting world. To submit a question for a future Parent Lean-In show, go to tiltparenting.com/lean-in. That's tiltparenting.com/LEANIN. And with that, here's today's episode. Hey everybody, today I am joined by Margaret Webb. Margaret is not just a dear friend of mine. She was my very first parenting coach. I wrote about her in Differently Wired. You may have read it. And she is also the lead parent coach in my Differently Wired Club, where she supports parents in that community. She's also the author of the wonderful new book, A Hero's Journey in Parenting, Parenting the Child You Didn't Expect When You Were Expecting, which is, in my opinion, an absolute must read for any parent raising a neurodivergent child. It's the book that I wanted Margaret to write for years because she shares all of her wisdom and her comfort and her tools and her hard-won wisdom. So, all right, I'm going to stop gushing. Welcome, Margaret. I'm so happy you're here.
I am so excited to be here, and I'm excited to tackle this question.
Yes, me too. Okay, let's get into it. The question is, I need help with my kids who are overly energetic and causing complete bedtime chaos. In my home, my children, who are 6 and 9, often egg each other on and end up wrestling, leading to injuries due to their impulse control issues. With both having ADHD and my older son being autistic, it's becoming increasingly difficult to separate them. How can I help them settle down and get things done, especially during transitions where we have to do things like getting ready for school or for bedtime? So, a lot to get into. I think we'll take our quick break now, and when we come back, we will get into our answers. Are you missing someone this holiday season and wish they could be part of your festivities from afar? Skylight Frame is the perfect gift. This touchscreen digital photo frame is a hit with the whole family. You can upload thousands of photos straight from your phone, and they'll appear in seconds. There are a lot of things I love about Skylight Frames, but here are just a few. First, it's really fast and easy to set up. I gave it to my parents last Christmas, and they didn't even need my help to get it going. Sharing photos, also super easy. Just invite friends and family to send photos through the free Skylight app or via email. No accounts, no subscriptions, no hassle. And the best part, you can send photos from anywhere, whether you're across the country or across the world. With a simple tap, your pictures show up instantly on their frame, making it the fastest, easiest way to stay connected. And unlike social media, it's totally private, so you're sharing meaningful moments just with your inner circle. With that said, my mom loves grabbing photos I post online and adding them to their Skylight frame. Skylight frames are a fun, low-effort way to keep everyone feeling close without the need for printing or scrolling. And now, as a special limited-time offer for our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com/tilt. That's skylightframe.com/tilt. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/tilt. How many skincare products do you have? Having just packed up and unpacked mine, I was surprised at just how many creams and masks and serums I had. I can't even remember what they're supposed to do. Imagine streamlining it down to 5 essential products that we can happily keep right on the counter, and they actually work. That's the idea with JLo Beauty. JLo Beauty's Deluxe Kit simplifies things with a 5-step routine designed to cover everything you need for radiant, healthy-looking skin. This easy AM/PM one-and-done kit gives you smoother, brighter skin while protecting against UV exposure and reducing fine lines and wrinkles. I'm excited to try the JLo Glow Serum because it helps skin look more lifted with an immediate and lasting glow with daily use. Oh, and definitely that eye cream. JLo Beauty products are as luxurious as they look, with premium ingredients and packaging that make them feel high-end without the splurge. For a glowing, simplified routine, try that JLo Beauty Deluxe Kit for 60 days risk-free. And if it's not love, you can return the bottles, even if they're empty, for a full refund. Get the only skincare routine you'll ever need. Head to jlobeauty.com/tiltparenting to receive 20% off plus 3 free gifts, including 2 quality face masks and 1 hydrating base soap balm. Head to jlobeauty.com/tiltparenting for 20% off and 3 free gifts. A $175 value. jlobeauty.com/tiltparenting.
The sounds of the season can often sound like this.
So, when are we getting some grandkids?
But with Hilton's Season to Stay sale, they could sound a bit more like this. Or this. Stay and save up to 20% off when you book before January 5th at Hilton.com. Hilton, for the stay. Minimum 2-night stay required. Excludes luxury and all-inclusive properties. Terms and conditions apply.
And we are back. And again, the question we're answering is a 6 and a 9-year-old who are overly energetic. And it sounds like transitions, bedtime, leaving the house. It's all very chaotic. And both kids are ADHD. One is odd ADHD. And this parent is having a hard time separating them and needs some strategies to help them settle down so they can get stuff done. So, Margaret, I'm going to ask you to take this one first. I'd love to hear what came up for you when you heard this question.
Yes. So the first thing that came up is that it is absolutely typical for a lot of kids to, especially those ages, to have a lot of energy and to want to avoid transitions. Mm-hmm. And so what's a great way to avoid transitions? Then, wrestling or getting into it and using all that energy that they've got. And so I want to put that out there that sometimes, especially if those are the only kids that you have or the only kids that you're around, it can seem like, oh my gosh, it's too much. And it probably does feel like a lot, but it's also fairly typical for that to happen. Now, that said, I'm always curious about the underlying why. And so it's like, what's the underlying why around the tension around transition? And so it's like, transition before bed. Well, we don't want to go to bed or we don't want to go to school. And so what can we do is we can get all, there's like this nervous energy or this anxious energy or just big energy. And they can be getting what I call shadow payoffs from utilizing that energy in ways that are not ideal for parents. And so I always like to think about, okay, they're, in these situations, are they getting shadow payoffs? And a shadow payoff is just like they're getting something from the experience that is not ideal, but they're still getting something from it. And so that can look like the parent. It can look like them wrestling, so they're getting a shadow payoff from their siblings. And so they're getting to have some of that energy burned off. The parent might engage in a way where it's like, an increase in energy. It might be yelling. It might be, like giving ultimatums and all of that stuff, which as an adult, you're thinking like, how is that a payoff? But they're still getting a different kind of attention and they're getting a different, they're getting energy that might be meeting their own energy. And so I'm always curious about that in the sense of looking at, okay, well, what's working, what's not working, and what can we do different? And to be able to zoom out and think about, okay, well, what's going on? And I'm focusing on 3 characters because I don't know if there's a partner or not. There wasn't any mention of a partner or a husband or a wife or anything. So I'm focusing on 3. And so it's zooming out and looking at what's going on with you during these times. And I will be honest and say that when I did this, it was super humbling because I realized that I was distracted or that I was trying to do something, like I was trying to get something done, but then I wanted him to get ready for school. And he couldn't. He didn't have the executive functioning skills to be able to get himself organized. And so I was doing something aside from that. And so I like to think about what is my role in this? What am I doing as the parent? What does that look like? And do I need to kind of restructure things if I do notice that, oh yeah, like I had to learn to shut my computer off. I had to learn okay, now is not the time to answer emails because he needs me to help him get ready for school or to get ready for bed. And he's going to react to my lack of attention by increasing his energy in order to get my attention. Shadow payoff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's the parent circle, and then this person has a 6-year-old. And so looking at their circle and thinking about what's going on with the 6-year-old. What might they be avoiding or what might they be needing or wanting? And then you've got the 9-year-old and what's going on. And doing so not in a shaming or there's, we're doing things wrong, but to zoom out and think about, okay, this is what each of these individuals need and want, or what's actually going on. How do we approach this in a way where we can create something that feels better for all of us? And what can that look like? And that's where getting super curious about what does our current routine or schedule look like? And really just doing so from a place of curiosity and not judgment, but just what does it look like? And is there anything that we can rejigger, anything that we can kind of shift around, maybe get things ready at a time? This question actually made me think about something tomorrow, just making dinner at a different time so that we can reheat it because I've got to take my son to a social group at 5:30. So it's okay, but really thinking about, can we do things at a different time to get ready for school
Mm-hmm.
or to get ready for bed? And that way then at bedtime, we're just focused, maybe it's teeth brushing or showering an earlier time or a different time, just shaking things up a little bit to see if that might have an impact on how everybody responds. Also, since they mentioned that there's a lot of wrestling, are there any, taking into consideration those sensory needs or the needs of their bodies to be moving and to have that big energy? Are there things that you can do, or are you doing heavy work or activities to release energy? Are they working with an OT that might be able to give you some ideas of things to do so that they don't need to wrestle with each other, where they're actually kind of, okay, all right. So there's so much that kind of intertwines, but that's where my thoughts went.
Yeah, that's great. You definitely touched upon some of the stuff that I had written down as well, starting with getting really curious about what it is that's setting them off, what is underneath that, right? The egging on or whatever's going on. So are they overtired? Do they have too much energy? Is it a sensory overload? Do they have anxiety over the expectations or the tasks that are to come? One sibling pushing another's button. So really, it's so important to get to the root of that so that you're addressing the right problem or the unsolved problem or the lagging skill or whatever it is. Because if you just start kind of trying to come up with strategies and rules for the external behavior You might get some quick mini wins, but there's not going to be like learning there that's going to happen. And it would probably be short-lived. I love that you talked about building in the heavy lifting. That's something I talked about doing also like way before bed, just from like a sensory diet perspective. And listeners, if you haven't read The Out of Sync Child, there's a lot of tools in there, and a lot of talk about how to do that kind of heavier work, or what does, from a sensory perspective, what does a child need? I remember my husband used to wrestle with Asher at bedtime, big time, just to kind of work all that stuff out. It was like this, like, all right, let's go to the wrestling match on the bed, just to kind of work all that stuff out. So are there ways to do that? The other stuff that came up for me, well, a couple things. Thinking about maybe, and doing this in collaboration with our kids, but creating jobs with our kids so they know there are like different roles, like giving them something to do could distract them, could get them engaged in different ways. Again, designing what the jobs are together. And you could just, get silly with them and create funny job titles, and just so that the kids have something to do specifically. They have a task that they know they can do that kind of can keep them focused, but that's fun, as opposed to like getting out the door. Your job is to put on your shoes and blah, blah, blah. But can you come up with a funny name for the different things that have to happen? And then also lowering your expectations during these transitions, and prioritize shifting the energy, which means managing your own energy as you're navigating this stuff. Especially with transitions, like it's really hard because, there's these basic things. We all have to go to bed every night, right? And we all have to leave the house at some point. And if our kids are school age and they're going to school, we all have to get out the door for that. So we can get really rigid in what this should look like. And these areas of transition we can have these kind of rules that are unquestioned. Well, they have to be able to do this, or, so we just kind of plug ahead. And so if we can kind of lower the expectations, kind of recognize what's hard about this, and try to break those cycles, that it sounds like there are some like predictable cycles now of how things are going, by pushing some sort of emotional reset button, and then really working on managing your own energy. So your own anxiety or frustration about these transitions isn't contributing to anything else that's going on. The last thing I'm going to mention, and I'll see if there's anything else you want to add. Margaret, as you were talking, I was remembering the mistaken goals chart in positive discipline, because as you were talking about shadow payoffs, that's what I was thinking about. So I'll have a link to this in the show notes. It can be a really interesting tool because it really prioritizes the parent's feeling, right? So if the child is like, has this misguided power, this is what I'm, from the question, I think this is misguided power these kids are having, right? And the way they're kind of like pushing each other's buttons and stuff. And the parent then is feeling angry or challenged or defeated, right? And tends to react by, I'm just going across the chart here, fighting, thinking you can't get away with this, or wanting to be right, or I need to make you do this the right way. That response usually for the child then could be intensifying the behavior. It could be bringing out more defiance. So we're not going to get the outcome that we want. We might be contributing to that, but really, so if you go across on this chart, the coded message is this is a child who wants to help or who needs choices. So we can kind of, based on how we're feeling and what we're seeing the child do, they have these goals that they're just going about it the wrong way. So I would encourage, I'll have again a link to this in the show notes, but this can be really interesting. The way that we can respond then is to acknowledge that we can't make our kids do something. We can redirect to positive power. We can ask for help. We can offer limited choices. We can withdraw from the conflict and calm ourselves down. We can act instead of using our words. We can just kind of use our behavior and our calm energy to shift things and develop this kind of mutual respect. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Sometimes when I'm feeling, especially, when my child was younger and I was just feeling some sort of way about what was going on, it was really helpful for me to look at, okay, if I'm feeling this way and my kid's doing this, what is actually the need here, or what is the real intention here? So, all right, I'm going to stop talking. Margaret, I'm going to turn it back to you if there's anything you want to add before we wrap up.
No, I think that is like what you just said is it's so huge, because, it can feel like that, where it's like, wait, I want all these things, or I feel like I should be able to control this situation. And, when you look at each individual involved, it's like, okay, well, we can't control any other, human being. I remember feeling so giggly with my sister, like, even though we would fight like cats and dogs, like I remember there were times where we were just super giggly and we would get in so much trouble because we were just in that state. And so I'm sure like the giggliness might then end up in wrestling and might end up in these other situations. So there's that kind of nervous energy or anxious energy. But then also just, when you're transitioning, especially like getting out of the door, there's so much executive functioning involved, like so much executive functioning. And it can feel so overwhelming as a parent. But I think if when you're zoomed out of what is actually going on, if you come up with a plan for really being specific about what the executive functioning needs are in order to get out the door, that can provide so much more ease for everybody involved. And it might be like, okay, like I'm expecting, I say, hey, go in and get ready for school. Okay, go in and get ready for school, or go get ready for bed. I mean, that's just like an open invitation for wrestling, like, or for just like, if you're an only child, it's just like an open invitation just to get lost in like doing, whatever it is that your mind is wanting to do. And so being more specific and realizing, oh, okay, this is who my child is, or this is who each of these kids are, and this is what each of them needs, this is how they operate best, can help you to not necessarily avoid, but just, address head on what's actually going on and what they actually need, instead of, oh, they're just being defiant, or they just won't do what I'm asking them. Maybe they don't know what to do, or maybe they know what to do, but it's just like swirling around in their brains and they need something more specific. And I think, for me, that's been super helpful with regards to transitions. And at first it felt a little bit more, direct, specific, deliberate, and it's eased up over the years. But at 21, he still needs it. And that's okay. So do I, so do I. So
True.
It's learning who each of us are.
That's great. I love that. I think that's a great note to end this on. We shared a lot of different thoughts and ideas. So I hope that one or more of those thoughts resonated with the person who asked this question. Thank you also for sending in this question. If you have a question for us, you can find a link on any of the show notes pages of the podcast page on Tilt Parenting, where you'll get taken to a form and you can submit the question in writing, or you can actually also leave a voicemail for me. So thank you again. And thank you, Margaret, for everything that you shared today and joining me for this one.
Thank you. It's been super fun.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. To learn more about the resources mentioned in this Parent Lean In episode, go to the extensive show notes page on tiltparenting.com. To submit a question for a future episode, just go to tiltparenting.com/leanin. That's tiltparenting.com/LEANIN. If you're looking for personal support from me and connection with the phenomenal community of parents raising neurodivergent kids, join us in the recently rebooted Differently Wired Club. The new Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Go to tiltparenting.com/club to learn more. The Tilt Parenting Podcast is hosted by me, Debbie Reber, author of Differently Wired and the founder of Tilt Parenting. To support this show, please join my Patreon campaign where you can set up a small monthly contribution. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more. If you want to follow Tilt on social media, go to @tiltparenting on Instagram and Facebook. Lastly, please take a minute to leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps this show stay visible so others can find it more easily. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information about any of the parenting resources Tilt offers, visit tiltparenting.com.
No one told us the truth about parenthood. Why? This is the podcast everyone needed before they had kids, because now that those little ones are here, there is a lot to unpack. I'm Rachel Shepardota, and I am your host for the podcast No One Told Us, where we tell the truth about parenting and let you in on all the stuff you really should have known about before having kids. I am the founder of Hey Sleepy Baby, but this podcast is so much more than sleep. We'll be diving into all the topics that you really care about and need to know while you do your best job raising those adorable tiny humans. Our goal is to just make you feel less alone and less overwhelmed. There are so many things that no one tells us before becoming a parent, and I think that we should really pull back the curtain on becoming a first-time or second-time mom or dad to share the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll have a little education, a little fun, and a whole lot of heart that goes into each and every episode. So join me and our amazing guests each week to hear us talk about what no one told us.